The High Court in Pretoria has ruled that level 3 and 4 lockdown regulations are invalid and unconstitutional. Government has 2 weeks to respond to fix the part that have been declared unconstitutional. Well, the DA, for his part, has also gone to court on the same issue. Its leader, John Steenhuisen, is joining us now via Skype. Mr. Steenhuisen, a very good morning to you. Your initial reaction when you heard of the court ruling in Pretoria, though you were not the applicant in this matter?
Yes, Dan, we were very encouraged by the judgment handed down yesterday, because I think it's a very good portent for the outcome of a variety of the other cases that we have for both the High Court as well as the Constitutional Court going forward. I think that many of the regulations are petty and irrational and have had nothing to do whatsoever with an epidemiological response to combating the virus, and everything to do with a government that seems to have been enjoying the autocratic powers to be able to push people around and to make laws outside of the confines of parliamentary oversight.
And the judge in this particular case, I mean, having read the ruling myself in the early hours of this morning, was very clear about the importance of constitutionality.
Of course, and that's been our point all along around the Disaster Management Act, and that is the attack that we have on it in terms of the legal challenge in the Concourt, is that it has essentially removed the constitutionally prescribed elements of oversight and accountability, and during this time has completely sidelined the elected legislators of the country, as well as completely eradicated any form of oversight and accountability by Parliament. And we have seen the executive branch essentially making sweeping regulations and laws relating to clothing, tobacco, alcohol, with absolutely no reference to the elected lawmakers of the country. And we believe this is incredibly problematic. Also, the length of time in which government could keep us in a hard lockdown. It could be 4 weeks, 4 months, or 4 years. Unlike the State of Emergency Act, which has a 21-day return date to Parliament where the President must justify it, no such oversight and accountability exists in the Disaster Management Act, and we believe that is hugely problematic.
Now, just to point out to our viewers, there's a slight delay in this connection we have with you, Mr. Steenhuisen, and apologies for that. But in the conclusions, I mean, Judge Davis is very clear in saying that, and I'm looking at 9.1 of that ruling, that the minister's declaration, that's the Minister of Corporate Governance and Traditional Affairs, the declaration of a national state of disaster in terms of Section 27(1) of the Disaster Management Act in response to COVID-19 is found to be rational. So the declaration of a disaster, a national disaster that was done in March, is found to be rational. However, the promulgation of some of the regulations are found to be not rationally connected with the objectives of slowing the rate of infection.
Well, I think that's a very accurate analysis, and that's also why we supported the declaration of a disaster. We do have a disaster. We have a pandemic that is sweeping across South Africa, and we need to manage that pandemic for the foreseeable future, certainly for the next 18 to 24 months. But you do that by building a compact with your citizens as a government, and you bring them along in the process and make them partners in combating the virus by treating them as adults, giving them the full information, and not treating them like children. Unfortunately, government has failed the test on this when it comes to the regulations. And when you resort to the pettiness of telling adult citizens what they can wear, how they must wear it, what they can drink, when they can exercise, and slapping a military curfew on them, I think you break the compact between government and the people. And that's why we now have the slew of court cases against government. It could have been very different had they acted reasonably and rationally and got the buy-in from citizens. Instead, you're now seeing a widespread disregarding of the regulations because citizens don't regard them as justifiable. And this is problematic because we have to manage the virus going forward. There are going to have to be regulations that govern public behavior, big gatherings, mask wearing, social distancing. and we don't want to have these undermined by the petty irrationality of a bunch of autocrats who are drunk on power instead of focusing on combating the virus.
Now, Mr. Steenhuisen, should the government have declared a state of emergency rather in March, which constitutionally the president is entitled to do for 21 days?
No, I don't think you should have declared a state of emergency. I think it was right to call a state of disaster, as I've said. The state of emergency is really for a very serious state where there's a threat of war or gross insurrection around the country. A state of disaster was the right thing to do. And it's not the declaration of the state of disaster that's problematic. It is the way in which government has handled the regulatory environment around that is problematic. And I think the judge was also very clear about that the declaration of the state of disaster, as well as the gazetting of the state of disaster, was all past constitutional muster. Where issue has been taken, and it's the same area we have issue, is around the irrationality and unreasonableness of the regulations, as well as the fact that it has circumvented the legislative rights of Parliament, and it has circumvented the Bill of Rights, which citizens have to protect them. And this is perhaps best evidenced by the fact that by week 3 of the hard lockdown, we had more deaths from police and military brutality than we'd had from the virus itself. Measures that clearly had nothing to do with stopping the virus and everything to do with enforcing authoritarianism and regulatory pettiness.
Mr. John Steenhuisen of the Democratic Alliance, thank you very much for your time.